Gregg S. Bursey was born in St. Cloud, Minnesota. After completing high school in 1989, he enlisted into the United States Army as a military policeman and a guaranteed assignment to Europe. He graduated from MP school on November 9th, 1989, exactly on the day of the fall of the wall. Gregg Bursey arrived at the US Army Replacement Center in Frankfurt, Germany, where the specific unit assignments were issued, and was thrilled to learn that he would be assigned to the Berlin Brigade's 287th Military Police Company. Upon arriving in Berlin, he was assigned police patrols duties, which include patrolling the Berlin Wall and recording the numbers of soldiers and police at each of the designated checkpoints into East Berlin. The newest task to that duty was to also record the number of new openings in the wall and whether they were manned or just completely opened and unguarded. Gregg Bursey worked many shifts at the Allied checkpoints Bravo and Charlie. The duties at the checkpoint were to inspect American soldiers and issue travel briefings prior to the soldiers entering East Berlin. As an American MP, he patrolled into East Berlin to check on the travelers and ensure they returned to West Berlin prior to the curfew. After Gregg Bursey left Berlin in 1992, he continued to serve in the US Army for another 18 years. He retired from the US Army in 2009 and currently lives with his wife and 2 children in Virginia. He worked for 7 years with the United States Marshal Service and now works for the Federal Judiciary in Washington, D.C. On a Wednesday, October 3rd, 1990, German reunification was formally completed when the accession of the German Democratic Republic to the Federal Republic of Germany took effect. How did your daily work routine change from October 2nd to 4th? At that time, you were a part of the 287th Military Police Company.
Well, the mission kind of changed after the checkpoints went away. That was now a duty that we didn't have to continue to perform. And so our focus started to change more towards the law enforcement with the Army, the garrison that was in the city. And we also started to do even more training for our combat skills and for the deployments that would come up. We would start, without the restrictions of having to stay in the city of Berlin, we would start being eligible to get deployed overseas or any contingency operations the U.S. Army may have.
As an American military police, you patrolled into East Berlin. What were the reactions like you were confronted with? What were your feelings? How did reactions and feelings, change from the beginning until the end of your service?
Well, it was really a stark contrast to go from West Berlin, where it was Mercedes and Porsche, and as you drive into the east, it's the Trabants, that sound like an American lawnmower. So the stark contrast between the east and the west for me was just looking at the cars and, some of the fashion, in the late 80s and 90s, a little bit more color on the west side, and on the east side, it was still grays and blacks, and it had a completely different feel to it.
What were your travel briefings to the soldiers entering East Berlin like?
The travel briefings were pretty routine. There was a form, almost a checklist that we would go off. First, we would inspect their uniforms, so that way their uniforms were perfect, so that way they would present, a perfect image when they went over to the east side. But it was real basic stuff. If they were to be confronted by like the German police or any Soviet militaries, we gave them a form that was in German and Russian and English, that if there's any kind of confrontation, they were actually supposed to, summon and request a Soviet officer would come and deal with the situation, even if it was something minor like a traffic accident or maybe a dispute in a bar, something like that.
What was your most difficult situation as a military police officer on patrol?
The most difficult part, and there were not many at that time in Berlin. It was a great time to be there, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. But just the routine police work, if there's an illness, or a death, something like that is always the worst. If you go to a traffic accident and you see that somebody's been injured severely.
And how was there the collaboration with the Berlin police or the British and the French colleague or the Russian colleague? How was it?
When I was there, we had a very good relationship with our German police. We actually had German police officers inside of our MP station on Andrews Barracks. And so we worked very closely with them. But the German police, even out in the city as we would patrol, were always very friendly. We had a great relationship. Anybody who's worked with the British know that they are they're a special breed and very, very great people, great sense of humor. So anytime you can work with the Brits, it's usually going to be a joy and a highlight.
What was your most surprising experience in a positive sense in this time?
Probably one of the more positive events or something that I really didn't expect is one day when I was working at Checkpoint Charlie, I think it was already out in the news and the papers that they announced the day that the checkpoint would be closed. And I had a very elderly couple come up to me. My guess would be 70s or 80 years old. And the gentleman had tears in his eyes. And I don't think that he spoke a lot of English. And, the wife, looked really distraught. And the gentleman actually reached out his hand, like he wanted to shake my hand. So I went to go shake his hand. And he almost fell on me and started to hug me. And he was still crying. And he said, "Thank you, thank you, thank you. You never stop coming." So me at the time, I think I was 19 or 20 years old. I had nothing to do with World War II. I wasn't there when the wall came, went up and all the hostilities. I wasn't there when the families were divided, but he still saw an American in uniform and was thankful that that line of succession never stopped and never broke. We never left them, even when the city was surrounded. We went to such great lengths, with the Berlin airlift, to make sure that the people that we had just fought in World War II were taken care of and treated humanely and try to really just help with their survival. It was so bleak at the time. So, I was like, "It's not me, it wasn't me." And he says, "No, but it was you and the people before you. You never stopped coming." And so that was really touching, to me. I was glad to be there for him. It was great. That was probably one of the highlights of the entire time I was in Berlin.
What personal expectations did you have at that time with regard to the further development of this friendship?
I'm not the kind of guy that usually has a lot of great expectations. If you have high expectations, they can lead to disappointment. But if you go in with an open mind, you'll always be surprised. And, anything that's positive seems more of a gift, as opposed to an entitlement. So I go in with my eyes open, my ears open, and I try to enjoy everything I come across. And in the Army, you need a good sense of humor too. So, that helped me quite a bit.
And what expectations or wishes do you have today concerning this relation between Berlin and the United States of America?
I would like to see the relationship still be something that's valued. It was very easy in the 80s, in the years prior, to see how important it was because you actually had a physical barrier there. I would like to see that as time goes on, and maybe the younger generations that weren't there to see that and to feel it and experience it, that they would still appreciate how we worked together and came together. I don't think you can separate Berlin from World War II in any way, where two sides that had to fight against each other wound up working together, living together, and forming a friendship. And if the effort's put in, you can maintain those friendships, and those friendships result in peace. And everybody wins when it's peaceful.
So tell us, what story is hidden in the photo you selected from 1990, I suppose?
Well, this is the photo that I chose, and this is going to be probably about June of 1990. And I really enjoyed it because it actually includes the American MPs, myself, and a couple other guys. I would be on the far left, but we also had a British MP, a Soviet officer, and the French gendarmerie. And so all four of the Allied powers were standing there together. And maybe even a year prior, that wasn't even in most people's consciousness as a possibility. So things can change very, very quickly. And the people that you train to fight war against could all of a sudden become your allies. But the reason that I chose this picture is because of some of the events that ended up happening while this picture was taken. So this picture that I'm holding right now was taken with my camera, and I gave it to one of the other Soviet soldiers as we were standing outside to have our picture taken. And I didn't think much of it. There was a lot of people taking pictures at the time. But a couple hours later, a gentleman came back to the Allied checkpoint and presented me with this picture. It's actually the same pose with the same people, but it now includes the MP car and the Soviet soldier holding my camera. And I thought it was really, very friendly of a gentleman to actually go take this picture. And in those days, you didn't just link it, with Wi-Fi or Bluetooth to a printer. You actually had to have the film developed and then printed on real paper. And then to my surprise, our German police friends actually presented me this a couple days later. It was actually on the cover of the Berliner Morgen Post. And so something really small and innocent like that, something that took maybe, 30 seconds to do, and I'm still holding the newspaper more than 30 years later. So that was pretty neat. I had a great time there. Berlin was a great experience for me, and it's one of the things that I'm really most proud of my entire years in the Army.
Thank you for this kind story, and thank you for the interview and your service.
Oh, thank you. And anything I can do to help out, I'm happy to help.